His hands slid lower in our shared bed. What happened next shocked me. His hand went lower. I couldn't resist. In the dead of night, as I lay frozen in our shared bed, his hand slid down my side, igniting a fire I couldn't ignore. We were just roommates, best friends hiding from the world, but that touch shattered everything. What started as survival in a cold New York winter spiraled into a forbidden desire that could destroy us both, facing betrayal, heartbreak, and a family's wrath. Would we survive the truth? The city never sleeps, but I was exhausted. I'm Alex, 25, and New York City was my escape from a suburban Connecticut family that never accepted me. Their cold stares and pointed silences after I came out as Gay pushed me to leave with just a backpack and a broken heart. The memory of that final dinner still haunted me, my father's fork clattering against his plate, my mother's eyes refusing to meet mine, my younger sister Claire looking between us with confusion and growing understanding. "This is just a phase," my mother had whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it true. But I knew better. I'd known since I was 16 and felt my heart skip when David Martinez smiled at me in calculus class. My best friend Jordan, also 25, opened his Brooklyn walk-up to me without hesitation. We'd met in college at SUNY Purchase, bonded over late-night talks about philosophy, and shared dreams of freedom from our suffocating hometowns. His laughter could light up the darkest days, this infectious sound that started deep in his chest and bubbled up until his whole body shook. His one-bedroom apartment became my sanctuary, cramped but warm, with mismatched furniture he'd collected from street corners and thrift stores. The walls were covered in his photography, black and white shots of the city that captured moments of beauty in unexpected places. With rent splitting our meager budgets in half, we shared his bed, a practical choice in the freezing winter of 2025. It was just survival, I told myself, as we lay inches apart on the lumpy mattress with its threadbare sheets. His steady breathing calmed my chaos, the sound more soothing than any meditation app. Jordan smelled like the lavender soap he bought in bulk from the bodega downstairs, mixed with the faint scent of the darkroom chemicals from his photography hobby. Sometimes I'd catch myself breathing deeper, trying to memorize that smell, telling myself it was just comfort, just friendship. Jordan was my rock, the guy who'd stayed up with me through panic attacks at 3 a.m., never judging when I'd hyperventilate about job interviews or family calls I couldn't bring myself to answer. He'd make terrible instant hot chocolate and put on old episodes of The Golden Girls until I could breathe normally again. "Dorothy Zbornak would have words for your parents," he'd say, doing his best B. Arthur impression until I laughed despite myself. But one night, everything shifted like tectonic plates beneath my feet. After a grueling day dodging whispers from strangers on the subway, guys like me always drew looks, the kind that made you check over your shoulder and plan your exit route. I came home drained. Jordan was already in bed, reading a photography magazine by lamplight, his arm draped over me in sleep later that night, heavy and warm across my chest. My heart pounded not from fear but from a spark I couldn't name, electric current running from where his skin touched mine. Was it just comfort? His warmth lingered like a brand, as city lights flickered through our single window, casting shifting shadows on the cracked ceiling. I lay frozen, memorizing the rhythm of his breath against my neck, the way his fingers curled slightly against my ribs, a dangerous question forming in the space between heartbeats. What if this is more than friendship? What if the way he looked at me over morning coffee meant something? What if I wasn't imagining the lingering touches, the way conversations died when our eyes met? The city hummed outside our thin walls, sirens, late-night conversations in Spanish from the apartment next door, the distant rumble of the subway, but all I could hear was the question echoing in my chest, terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Days blurred into routines that felt both comforting and torturous. Jordan slung coffee at a hipster cafe in Park Slope called Grind, where the regulars knew his name and tipped well because he remembered their orders and asked about their kids. Meanwhile, I scraped by waiting tables at an all-night diner in Manhattan, serving coffee and regret to insomniacs and shift workers. The fluorescent lights gave everyone a sickly pallor, and the perpetual smell of bacon grease clung to my clothes, no matter how much I scrubbed. We cooked together in his tiny kitchen, his spicy tacos vastly outshining my consistently burnt toast, laughing until midnight about customers who ordered half-calf oat milk, extra hot but not too hot lattes. Jordan had this way of turning disasters into adventures. When I managed to set off the smoke detector making scrambled eggs, he opened all the windows and we ate cereal for dinner while dancing to music from his phone, the city skyline twinkling beyond our fire escape. But the bed was where lines blurred dangerously. His knee brushed mine one night, the contact lasting just a moment too long to be accidental, sending heat shooting up my spine. The touch was electric, searing, and I pulled back like I'd been burned, terrified of ruining the one person who saw me for who I really was. The mattress suddenly felt miles wide and inches narrow at the same time. My parents' rejection still stung with the persistence of a paper cut. "You're a disappointment," my dad had said, his voice flat and final. "We raised you better than this." The words played on repeat in darker moments, a soundtrack of shame I couldn't silence. Jordan was different from them, I knew that, but what if I misread the signals? What if I projected my longing onto innocent moments? I'd catch him starring during dishes, his hazel eyes holding secrets I desperately wanted to decode. When he'd hand me a plate to dry, his fingers would linger against mine for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Did he feel this magnetic pull too, or was I constructing fairy tales from friendship? Society didn't make navigation any easier. At my diner job, a coworker named Gary muttered slurs when I dropped a plate during rush hour, the ceramic shattering across the black and white checkered floor. "Typical," he'd said under his breath, but loud enough for the kitchen to hear. The words cut deeper than I'd admit, each syllable a reminder that I was different, unwelcome, wrong somehow. Other waiters pretended not to hear, but their discomfort was palpable, conversations dying when I approached. Back home, Jordan's casual "You okay?" felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man, but I deflected, scared to voice the longing growing inside me like a living thing. "Just tired," I'd say, when what I meant was, "I'm falling for you and it's terrifying." Each night, the bed became an emotional minefield. When his hand grazed my waist again, the touch deliberate this time, lingering, exploring, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to lean in, to let the spark ignite into something beautiful and consuming, but fear, of losing him, of the world's judgment, of my own heart breaking, kept me frozen like a deer in headlights. The city's pulse outside mocked my internal chaos, as tension coiled tighter each night, ready to snap. I'd lie awake listening to sirens and distant music, Jordan's breathing steady beside me, and wonder how long we could exist in this liminal space between friendship and something more, before one of us broke and changed everything forever. Weeks passed, and our shared bed became a silent battlefield where every movement felt loaded with meaning. Jordan's morning coffee runs to the bodega became my calm before the storm, his gentle teasing about my endless job hunt a familiar comfort that felt increasingly fragile. "Any responses to those applications?" he'd ask, settling beside me with 2 cups of awful bodega coffee that somehow tasted perfect when shared. But his glances lingered now, heavy with unspoken words that hung in the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. I'd finally landed a barista gig at a chain coffee shop in Midtown, but coworkers' side eyes followed me like shadows. "Is he one of those guys?" I heard whispered during shift changes, the question delivered with the kind of disgust reserved for discussing vermin. The manager, a tired woman named Linda, seemed sympathetic but kept her distance, probably afraid association would paint her with the same brush. At night, the mattress felt like it had physically shrunk, every accidental touch amplified tenfold. His fingers brushed my hip one evening and I froze completely, heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was certain he could hear it. The touch burned through the thin fabric of my sleep shirt, electric and intentional, and everything I'd been hoping for and dreading. Was it real this time, or was I still constructing meaning from innocent contact? I wanted to ask but choked on the words, terrified of breaking the fragile ecosystem we'd built, of destroying the one safe space I had left in a world that seemed designed to reject me. One night after too many beers at a dive bar called Murphy's, the kind of place where the bartender knew everyone's drink and personal problems, liquid courage finally loosened my tongue. The bar was dimly lit, all dark wood and worn leather, filled with the kind of people who minded their own business. We'd been talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easier with alcohol, lubricating the awkwardness that had been building between us. "Jordan," I said, my voice shaking like a teenager asking someone to prom, "I think I'm falling for you." The words hung in the smoky air between us, impossible to take back. His eyes widened, pupils dilated in the bar's amber lighting, and then he kissed me, hard, desperate, like he'd been holding back forever and the dam had finally burst. His lips tasted like beer and possibility, and for a moment the whole world narrowed to the point where we connected. "I've wanted this too," he whispered against my mouth, his breath warm and real, "but I'm scared." His Texas roots haunted him like a ghost. His family's conservative Baptist values loomed large in every conversation about home, in the way he'd changed the subject when his mother called. Joy surged through my veins like electricity, but so did doubt, the two emotions warring in my chest. We kissed again outside the bar, tentative this time, exploring each touch a promise and a question mark. His hands tangled in my hair and I pressed closer, wanting to memorize every second, every sensation. But the next night, back in our shared bed, he pulled back mid-kiss, his eyes clouded with something that looked like regret. "My dad would kill me if he knew," he muttered, voice thick with an accent that only emerged when he was emotional. "He'd disown me faster than you can say homosexual." My chest tightened like a fist clenching around my heart. Unrequited love stung worse than outright rejection, because at least rejection was clean, final. This felt like being offered water in a desert only to have it snatched away the moment it touched your lips. I wanted to shake him, to make him understand that his father's opinion mattered less than this thing growing between us, but fear was a language I understood too well. I'd spent years speaking it fluently. Society's weight pressed harder with each passing day, like atmospheric pressure before a storm that never broke. At a friend's party in a cramped East Village apartment, casual slurs got tossed around like party favors, each one making Jordan flinch visibly. I watched him shrink into himself, shoulders hunching defensively, and pushed for openness that felt increasingly impossible. "We can't live like this forever," I argued during a heated whispered conversation by the bathroom, but he retreated further, his silence louder and more devastating than any words. Then betrayal struck with the precision of a surgical blade. Our friend Mike, jealous of our closeness and the way we'd started unconsciously excluding others from our private world, overheard us arguing about coming out during what we thought was a private moment in his kitchen. In a moment of cruel calculation, he screenshotted our location from a dating app Jordan had forgotten to delete and texted our secret to Jordan's work group chat, outing us to virtual strangers with the clinical efficiency of a data breach. Jordan's face went white as printer paper as his phone buzzed with notification after notification, each sound like a nail being driven into a coffin. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice breaking like a teenager's, scrolling through messages that ranged from awkward support to outright hostility. My own phone lit up with anonymous hate, slurs, threats, venom typed by strangers who knew nothing about us except what they'd decided we represented. The words burned across my retinas: faggot, disgusting, unnatural, each one a small violence. I felt exposed raw, like someone had peeled back my skin and left my nerves exposed to air. The world's judgment crashed down like a tsunami, and I finally understood why people stayed closeted, why they chose the safety of lies over the vulnerability of truth. But understanding didn't make it hurt less, didn't stop the feeling that I was drowning in other people's hatred. Jordan shut down completely, becoming a ghost of himself, barely speaking beyond necessary pleasantries. I pushed desperately, needing him to fight for us, for this fragile, beautiful thing we'd started building, but he just shook his head like he was trying to clear water from his ears. "You don't get how hard this is," he said, voice low and defeated, staring at his phone like it contained his execution orders. "My entire family will know by tomorrow. My job, my church back home, everyone." I wanted to scream that I did understand. I'd lived it too, had hidden from my family's disgust, had felt the particular shame of loving someone the world told me I shouldn't. But his fear had become a wall between us, concrete and insurmountable, and I found myself on the wrong side, pressing my palms against it uselessly. Each night, the bed felt colder despite the radiator's persistent clanking, his body inches away but untouchable, as if he'd wrapped himself in barbed wire. I lay awake replaying everything: his first kiss, his immediate pullback, Mike's betrayal, the cascade of consequences neither of us had been prepared for. Was this love or just elaborate emotional torture? The city's hum outside felt mocking now, indifferent to my breaking heart, as tension coiled tighter and tighter, a spring compressed past its breaking point, ready to snap and destroy everything in its path. The fallout was more brutal than either of us had imagined. Mike's betrayal spread through our social circles like wildfire in dry grass. Jordan's boss at the coffee shop demoted him to closing shifts, citing team morale and customer complaints that probably didn't exist. My own diner shifts got cut without explanation, whispers of troublemaker and liability trailing me through the kitchen like smoke. The manager avoided eye contact, scheduling me for the dead hours when tips were non-existent and the only customers were drunk or desperate. Then my parents called, their voices sharp with the particular cruelty that only family can master. "We heard about your lifestyle," my mom spat over voicemail, the word lifestyle delivered like she was discussing a choice to collect stamps or join a cult. "You're no longer our son, don't contact us again." The words gutted me more efficiently than any physical violence could have, echoing years of their cold disapproval and confirming my deepest fears about conditional love. I saved the voicemail, playing it back during masochistic moments when I needed to remind myself why I'd left. I turned to Jordan for strength, needing him to be my anchor in the storm we were both drowning in, but he was unraveling too, coming apart at seams I hadn't even known existed. "I kissed someone else," he confessed one night, his voice cracking like ice under pressure. We were sitting on opposite ends of our small couch, the space between us feeling oceanic. "At a club in the village last weekend, some guy with dark hair who looked nothing like you. I was trying to see if you was real or just confusion." My world tilted sideways, gravity suddenly unreliable. Unrequited love wasn't just fear anymore. It was active betrayal, a knife twisted by the person I'd trusted most. The confession hung in the air like poison gas, contaminating every breath I tried to take. How could he touch someone else when I could barely stand the thought of anyone but him? I stormed out into the rain-soaked Brooklyn streets, tears mixing with the downpour until I couldn't tell where my pain ended and the weather began. The city looked different through the lens of heartbreak, neon signs blurred into watercolor, strangers' faces became threatening, every shadow seemed to judge. "How could you?" I shouted when I finally confronted him outside our building, my voice raw from crying and yelling at the indifferent sky. "How could you kiss him when you won't even hold my hand in public?" His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate, like an animal caught in a trap of his own making. I was scared, Alex, scared of losing everything, my family, my job, myself. I thought if I could prove it was just physical, just confusion, maybe I could go back to normal. Rain dripped from his hair, making him look younger and more vulnerable. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. Even when I was with him, I was wishing it was you. I wanted to hate him, to let anger burn away the love that was killing me, but his pain mirrored mine so perfectly it was like looking into a broken mirror. I'd hidden too, had spent years dodging my parents' judgment and society's sneers, building walls around my heart that even I couldn't always scale. But this hurt deeper than anything else, his doubt cutting where love should have healed, his betrayal poisoning the one pure thing I'd thought we shared. "I thought you chose me," I whispered, voice breaking like everything inside me was breaking. "I thought what we had meant something." He reached for me with shaking hands, but I backed away, heart shattered into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be reassembled, wandering into the city alone with nothing but rain for company and the terrible knowledge that even love couldn't save us from ourselves. Alone and directionless, I found unexpected refuge in an LGBTQ support group that met in the basement of a church in Manhattan. The irony wasn't lost on me, finding sanctuary in the same type of building that had been used to condemn people like us for centuries. But the strangers there shared stories of rejection and resilience with the kind of brutal honesty that only comes from having survived the unsurvivable. Their knowing nods gave me strength I didn't know I was borrowing, and slowly I began to understand that my story wasn't unique, wasn't ending, was just beginning. Jordan, meanwhile, hit bottom with the spectacular efficiency of a demolition. Fired from his coffee shop job for increasingly poor performance, showing up late, snapping at customers, general misery, he finally confronted Mike with the fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. But justice came from an unexpected source. Other colleagues, outraged by Mike's deliberate cruelty and violation of privacy, reported him to HR at his own job. The complaint led to suspension pending investigation, and suddenly Mike was the pariah, his reputation destroyed by the same gossip network he'd used to hurt us. Justice felt hollow at first, like winning a war after your city has been burned to the ground, but it was a start. A crack in the wall of consequences, proof that actions had reactions, that cruelty sometimes circled back to bite its perpetrator. My parents called again after weeks of silence, their tones softer but still uncertain, like they were navigating a minefield of their own making. "We were wrong," my mom admitted, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "We've been isolated. Your uncle won't speak to us, the neighbors avoid us. We're realizing maybe the problem isn't you." I didn't forgive them immediately. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's a muscle you exercise slowly. But their regret felt like the beginning of accountability. Jordan showed up at my door 3 weeks after I'd moved out, eyes hollow but determined, carrying a bouquet of bodega flowers and an expression that looked like hope fighting despair. "I betrayed us by hiding," he said, his voice raw from crying or screaming or both. "I betrayed myself by thinking I could choose who to love based on convenience." We talked all night in my new studio apartment, a shoebox with thin walls but rent I could almost afford, about society's chains, his father's rigid expectations, my family's conditional love, the impossible mathematics of being queer in a world designed for straight people. "I want to be better," he vowed as dawn light crept through my single window, painting everything gold and possible. "I want to be worthy of what we started." We started therapy, both individual and couples, learning to untangle fear from love, shame from identity. We joined community events, took small but revolutionary steps like holding hands in Central Park despite stares from strangers who thought their opinions mattered more than our happiness. Each act of public affection was a small rebellion, a reclaiming of space that had never been freely given. Mike faced continued fallout, shunned by mutual friends who were disgusted by his cruelty, his own relationship ending when his girlfriend learned what he'd done. Meanwhile, my parents sought counseling of their own, their tentative apologies building a fragile bridge across the chasm of years. Forgiveness wasn't easy or immediate. Some days I wanted to throw their progress back in their faces, to make them hurt the way they'd hurt me. But slowly, rooted in our shared fight for authenticity and the exhausting work of healing, something new grew where the old relationship had died. The city's hum felt less hostile now, more like background music to our careful reconstruction of trust, touch by careful touch, day by day. Months later, our love had become a quiet revolution, the kind that changes everything without making headlines. Jordan came out to his family with the kind of courage that only comes from having survived your own cowardice. His father struggled, his initial reaction everything Jordan had feared: anger, disappointment, threats to cut contact. But after weeks of painful silence, something shifted. His dad joined a support group for parents of LGBTQ children, slowly realizing his rigid judgment was costing him a son he loved more than his own prejudices. We volunteered at NYC Pride, turning our pain into purpose, sharing our story with others who were still navigating the dangerous waters between hiding and living authentically. There's something powerful about trauma transformed into service, about using your scars to light the way for others still lost in the dark. No more hiding, we held hands on subway platforms, kissed under streetlights, defied the world's glares with the simple revolutionary act of existing as ourselves. My parents, humbled by their own isolation and the realization that hate had cost them more than love ever could, started the slow work of rebuilding trust. Their apologies were sincere if imperfect, weighted with the understanding that some damage takes years to repair. We weren't magically healed, there were still setbacks, moments when old fears resurfaced, times when the world's judgment felt overwhelming. But we had each other and we had community, and slowly we learned that love wasn't fearless, it was choosing to show up despite fear. One night, lying tangled together in our shared bed, a new mattress in a new apartment we'd chosen together, Jordan whispered, "I'm done hiding. I choose you every day as many times as it takes." His kiss sealed the promise, deep and certain and tasting like the future we were finally brave enough to build. The city's pulse outside felt like a heartbeat we shared now, rhythm syncing with our own as we'd learned to move through the world as ourselves, together, proof that self-acceptance could conquer anything when paired with the courage to live your truth out loud. Hand in hand, we faced tomorrow and all the tomorrows after it, ready for whatever came next, finally understanding that love wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and showing up anyway, choosing each other again and again, building something real and lasting from the ashes of everything we'd thought we had to be.